My name is Claire Rowe. I'm 30, and for most of my life, I've existed like background music in my own family there. Technically, but only if you were really paying attention, which no one ever was, especially not my father. But on the night of his retirement party, in a ballroom full of his friends, colleagues, and our polished, perfect extended family, I decided to stop fading quietly into the wallpaper. I decided to speak. Not with a speech, not with a confrontation, but with truth. Hard, undeniable truth. Truth stored on a black flash drive the size of a cigarette lighter. Truth that would detonate everything they thought they knew about the son he praised and the daughter he forgot. Growing up, my brother Ryan was the golden boy. I don't just mean that metaphorically, he actually had a golden trophy shelf in his room. State champion, valedictorian, voted most likely to run a hedge fund before he could even drive. Dad beamed every time Ryan breathed. It was like he saw his own unfulfilled dreams getting a second chance through him. Ryan didn't just walk on water in our house. He practically owned the lake. I was the other one, the quiet one, the techie, the girl who didn't play tennis or make small talk with the country club wives. I was building websites before middle school ended. Won state science fairs, coded a prototype that ended up getting bought by an education software company when I was 26. But none of it ever made it to the family dinner table, if I mentioned it. Dad would nod vaguely and steer the conversation back to Ryan's quarterly bonus or golf game. I don't think he meant to hurt me. That's the saddest part. It wasn't deliberate cruelty, it was erasure, casual and constant, like I was a dull painting on the wall of Ryan's gallery. And for a long time, I told myself it didn't matter. I was doing fine. I had my own company now, small but growing, and I didn't need their applause. Until the night I finally realized that's not what I'd wanted. I didn't want applause. I wanted acknowledgement, just once, just enough to stop feeling like I was shouting into a void. When the email invitation to Dad's retirement gala arrived, subject line, celebrating 35 years of leadership and legacy, I hesitated. The attached RSVP link stared at me like a challenge. For a second, I thought about deleting it, but something in me shifted. Maybe it was bitterness. Maybe it was something closer to courage. Either way, I booked a flight to Chicago. The party was held in a chandeliered ballroom downtown. It was tasteful in that overcompensating, corporate America kind of way, white florals, jazz trio, filet mignon plated like artwork. People wore champagne smiles, and every other sentence began with, "Remember when Charles," as if my father were already a museum piece. I arrived late, on purpose. I didn't want to mingle. I just wanted to be a witness. I didn't expect to feel anything. But when I stepped into that space and saw Dad laughing with Ryan at the center of it all, that old familiar ache started tightening in my chest. I made my way to a far corner, near the dessert table, and sipped sparkling water while polite. Rehearsed stories filled the air like background static. And then the mic crackled. Dad stood at the center of the room, his arm draped over Ryan's shoulder like a sash of pride. In his other hand was a glass of champagne. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice warm and firm. "Seasoned by years of boardrooms and business deals, I've had a good run. A great run, honestly. But more than the deals I've closed, or the colleagues I've worked alongside, I'm proudest of my family, of my legacy." People nodded, glasses lifted. He smiled toward Ryan. "This man right here, my son, is the best thing I've ever built. Smart, driven, loyal, everything a father could ask for. The only child who's ever made me proud." The room erupted in applause. My ears rang. The only child. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I was frozen in place, fingers tightening around my glass. Somewhere in the background, I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. Ryan gave a modest smile, like he hadn't just been handed the whole crown. Mom glanced at me from across the room, her expression unreadable. I laughed. Not the polite kind, not even a bitter chuckle. It just came out sharp, involuntary, slicing through the polite hum of the party. A few heads turned. Ryan looked confused. Dad looked mildly annoyed. I stood up slowly, clutching my small evening purse, and walked toward the projector laptop still connected from the slideshow they'd just finished playing. I pulled out the flash drive. It was sleek, black, and innocuous looking, but it held everything. A carefully curated digital dossier, the fruit of months of silent research, because I'd known something was off with Ryan's work for a while. You don't grow up in a family like mine without learning to sense when a story smells wrong. And Ryan, his story reeked. "Then you'll love this," I said, loud enough for the mic to pick up. The room quieted. "Claire, what are you doing?" Mom whispered, stepping toward me. "I think it's time we celebrate the full picture," I said. I plugged in the drive. A folder appeared on screen for Dad, final gift. I opened it. A video started playing. It was security cam footage from Dad's office. The resolution was grainy, but Ryan's voice came through clearly. He was on a call, pacing, gesturing. "Listen, I told you we'll move the donations through the 401c shell. Dad signs off automatically. He doesn't even read the reports. It's clean on paper. Trust me." Gasps echoed. Glasses clinked. Someone dropped a fork. I hit pause. The screen froze with Ryan mid-sentence, smirking. "I've got more," I said. "Emails, transaction logs, altered signatures." Dad's face went pale. Ryan stammered something I didn't catch. And Mom, she looked at me not angry, not afraid, but something else. Something that made my stomach twist. Respect. She walked toward me slowly, took the flash drive from my hand, and turned back to face the room. "Thank you for coming," she said. Voice steady. "The party is over. Please gather your things." No one moved. For the first time in my life, everyone in the room was looking directly at me. And none of them saw just Claire who loves her computers. They saw someone who had finally decided not to disappear. The room emptied slowly, like the air had been sucked out of it. People shuffled awkwardly toward the exits, eyes avoiding contact, heels clicking against marble in uneasy rhythm. The jazz trio had stopped playing. The caterers stood frozen, unsure whether to clear plates or vanish. And at the center of it all, under dimmed chandeliers and wilted floral arrangements, we remained me, Mom, Dad, and Ryan. No music, no applause, just silence and the soft hum of something crumbling. Ryan was the first to break it. "Are you really buying into that?" he barked, voice tight and high, pointing at the blackened screen like it had committed treason. That clip was out of context. Claire's twisting everything. She's always been jealous. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Dad finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "Ryan, is that real?" Mom held the flash drive tight in her palm like it might burn her. She didn't look at either of them. She just said, "Let's go talk, privately." We moved into a side room, some kind of executive lounge, plush leather chairs, fake wood paneling, a fake sense of calm. But nothing about the air felt calm. It was brittle. My mother sat, set the flash drive on the coffee table like it was evidence in a trial, and looked at my father. "You need to hear this." Dad remained standing, arms crossed tightly over his chest, as if his own body might fall apart if he didn't hold it together. His jaw was clenched. I knew that look. I'd seen it my entire life when he didn't want to hear something that challenged his version of reality. "I don't want to fight," I said, "but I won't be silent anymore." Dad looked at me for a long time, and then he turned away. Ryan laughed sharp. Sarcastic. This is ridiculous. Claire's always had a flair for drama. It's just her fantasy of revenge. Mom's eyes snapped to him, and for the first time, I saw something in her expression that made even Ryan go quiet. Coldness. "No, Ryan," she said, her voice like a scalpel. "This isn't drama, this is fraud, embezzlement. You lied. To your father, to me, to everyone." His mouth opened to respond, but she didn't give him the chance. And I should have seen it sooner. There was a long, awful pause. Then she looked at me, softer now. "I suspected something years ago, but I didn't want to believe it. Your father always said Ryan had everything under control, that we should be proud, so I ignored the signs. When you told us about your software contract being picked up by the district, I didn't even reply properly. I'm sorry for that." It was strange hearing it, after years of emotional starvation. I wasn't sure what to do with even a drop of water. "I'm not here for an apology," I said carefully. "I just want the truth out, that's all." Dad sat down slowly. His shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen. Not in boardrooms, not during business deals. Now he looked like what he was, an aging man realizing his kingdom was built on lies. "I didn't know," he murmured. "Claire, I swear I didn't know what Ryan was doing." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I didn't care anymore. The damage was done, and his silence over the years had spoken louder than any confession. "But Mom," she leaned forward, "there's something else. Something you should know." I frowned. She inhaled deeply, like she was about to plunge into freezing water. "Your college fund. The one we told you had lost value in the recession. That wasn't the whole story." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice low. She turned to Ryan.
"You emptied it, didn't you?"
Ryan stiffened, then smirked, but not convincingly. It was an opportunity. I planned to pay it back. No one was using it, and I stood up so fast my chair tipped slightly. "You what?" "You were getting scholarships anyway," Ryan said with a shrug. "You didn't need it." My hands were shaking. I worked 3 jobs. I slept 4 hours a night through college. You stole from me, and no one said anything. "I didn't know," Dad said, quietly. Mom was crying now. I think part of me did, but I let him spin it, like always. I wanted to scream, but instead, I breathed, counted to 4. My voice, when I spoke, was barely above a whisper. "You told me I was too dramatic, that I should stop chasing attention, that Ryan was the one who deserved it, all while he took everything that was mine." Ryan rolled his eyes. "This again, you're not the victim here. Claire, you're just bitter." Bitter, I turned to him, my voice finally cracking. "I've spent my entire life being invisible, and now, when I finally speak, I'm bitter. You broke the law, Ryan. You broke this family." "I didn't break anything," he spat. "Dad did. He picked a favorite. Don't blame me for playing the role I was cast in." It was quiet after that. The kind of quiet that fills up a room like smoke. The kind that suffocates. Then Dad spoke, not looking at either of us. "What happens now?" I looked down at the flash drive. "We go to the authorities." Ryan laughed. "You think the police are going to care about one messy little fund?" I shook my head, Beko. "It's not one fund, it's a trail of fraud, or tax manipulation, falsified donation accounts, and I have all the documentation, and I'm not the only one who noticed. There's a white-collar crimes unit already investigating your firm. I just connected the dots." Dad looked like he might faint. Ryan's face went pale. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said. "I'm doing it to stop the damage." My mom stood, her shoulders straightened in a way I hadn't seen since I was a child. Then we go together." Ryan backed away, suddenly panicked. "You're really going to let her destroy me?" Mom stared at him. "You did that yourself." And just like that, the illusion shattered. We weren't a family anymore, not in the traditional sense. We were fractured pieces of a carefully curated image. But maybe, just maybe, those fractures could finally let in the truth. Because when lies burn, they light the path forward. By the time the three of us walked out of that side room, me, Mom, and Dad, the venue was deserted. Staff had finished cleaning. The cake was boxed and forgotten. And only a few forgotten napkins hinted that a party had ever taken place. Ryan was gone. No surprise there. He'd never been one to wait around when things didn't go his way. Dad was silent the whole drive home, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from unraveling. I rode in the back seat, flash drive in my purse, heart beating to the rhythm of something I couldn't yet name. Mom stared out the window. I watched her reflection more than I looked outside, trying to read the emotion she wore like armor, half guilt, half resolve. When we got home, I didn't go inside. I told them I needed air, needed time. That was half true. What I really needed was space. From them, from the pressure, from the weight of what came next. I drove across town and sat in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner I used to frequent during college. The fluorescent lights hadn't changed. Neither had the sense of emptiness that came with remembering how alone I had felt for so many years. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Drafts folder. Dozens of unsent messages to Mom. Some were angry. Some just sad. All deleted before ever being sent. I wasn't ready then. Maybe I wasn't even ready now. But ready or not, I was in it. The next morning, Mom texted, "I've thought about it. Let's go together." She met me outside the precinct. She didn't wear makeup. Her coat was buttoned too tight, like she didn't trust her own hands to stop shaking. I didn't comment. We walked in. Detective Elise Montreux was calm, methodical, and didn't flinch when I told her what I had. "You're not the first to raise concerns about that firm," she said, pulling out a folder. "But your documentation may be the clearest." Her eyes flicked over the flash drive like it was a live grenade. "You understand this might trigger an official federal investigation." I nodded. "I'm not doing this lightly." Montreux looked at my mother, who hadn't spoken yet. "And you are they?" "His mother," she replied, before correcting herself. "Her mother. And I'm here because I've enabled too much for too long." Montreux's brows lifted slightly. "Then let's talk about everything." We spent nearly 2 hours in that gray office. I outlined what I found. The fake donations, the misappropriated expense reports, the quiet bank transfers to shell accounts with Ryan's fingerprints all over them. Mom provided corroborating details, dates, conversations, even some emails she'd seen but ignored. By the time we left, Montreux promised to elevate the case. "You may be the missing piece," she told me. "But the thing about becoming a whistleblower, even within your own family, is that there's no medal, no parade, just silence and consequences." News started trickling out 2 weeks later. Ryan's firm put out a vague PR statement about internal restructuring and alleged improprieties. They didn't mention his name, but everyone knew. A few business blogs picked it up. A reporter called. I didn't answer. Another left a voicemail offering anonymity in exchange for an interview. I deleted it. This wasn't about publicity. It was about pulling poison from the bloodstream of a family that had festered far too long. Still, people talked. Neighbors whispered. Family friends checked in. One even said, "I always wondered why Ryan seemed so slick." Now they wondered out loud. My phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. "Dad." I stared at the screen for a full minute before answering. Claire, I saw the reports. His voice was quieter than I remembered. I didn't know about the fund, or the donations, or any of it. Silence. I'm sorry, he added. But sorry didn't rewind time. Sorry didn't pay tuition bills. Or erase birthdays spent alone. Or bring back the college years I worked myself sick while Ryan stole from us all. So I said nothing. He kept speaking. I want to talk. About us. If you'll let me. His voice cracked. Just slightly. I ended the call without replying. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't trust that this was change not yet. Mom came over that evening. She brought takeout and didn't try to force conversation. We sat at my kitchen table eating lo mein out of cartons like we used to when Dad was on business trips. It felt normal. Strange how something so small could feel like progress. He's reeling, she said after a while. I know. He thinks he failed. He did. She nodded slowly, but he also thinks maybe this is his shot to fix it. I didn't answer. I couldn't trust that hope yet. I still remembered being 13 and overhearing Dad tell someone at a work party, Claire's more of a quiet thinker. Ryan's the real leader. I'd clutched my glass of ginger ale so hard it cracked in my hand. Mom reached into her bag and pulled out a box. Inside was my science trophy 8th grade regional winner. I hadn't seen it in over a decade. You found it? In the attic, behind Dad's old golf bags. I stared at it, fingers tracing the brass plate. It still had a dent in the corner from where I dropped it on the bus ride home. He said it wasn't meaningful. I murmured. Mom's eyes filled with tears. He was wrong. I didn't cry, but my throat tightened in that unbearable way, the kind that wraps grief and vindication into one knot you can't swallow. That night, I didn't sleep, not out of anxiety, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything Ryan's sneer. Dad's silence. Mom's shaking hand when she first touched the flash drive. Every moment, every lie, every dismissal. It all looped in my head like a tape I never chose to record. But this time, I wasn't powerless. I had agency, truth, proof, and for the first time, a voice louder than my brother's, which made the knock on my door the next morning feel less surprising and more inevitable. It was Ryan. Still in a tailored suit, but the buttons were undone, the tie crooked. He looked tired, angry, desperate. You ruined me, he said the second I opened the door. No, I replied. You did that yourself. He barged in without asking. Typical, always entitled, always assuming the world revolved around his orbit. You think you're better than me now? You think being righteous makes up for being irrelevant? You think defrauding clients makes you important? He flinched. A small one, but I caught it. I did what I had to do. He snapped. I was protecting Dad. Protecting the family name. No, I said calmly. You were protecting yourself. You always have. He slumped into my couch like he belonged there. I'm facing charges. My firm cut ties. My wife's gone. Took the kids. You happy now? I didn't do this to be happy. Then why he barked? I took a step closer. Because I was tired of being erased. That shut him up, for a beat. He looked around my apartment modest, clean. Nothing like the penthouse he used to brag about. He sneered. You think Mom's really on your side? She's just scared. When this is over, she'll come back to me. Then why are you here? He didn't answer. Because we both knew why. His empire was gone. His mask was off. And for the first time, he was the one left invisible. But I hadn't even gotten to the part that mattered most. The part he didn't see coming. And what came next would change everything. Ryan sat in my apartment like a ghost who refused to know he was dead. I stood across from him, watching as his hands twitched against the fabric of his trousers, fidgeting not out of nervousness, but habit. He'd always been a man of appearances. And now the absence of power left him unmoored. I didn't offer him water. I didn't ask him to leave. I just waited for him to admit what he came here for. But he didn't, not directly. Instead, he said, "You always thought you were better because you stayed clean. But you didn't have the guts to do what it takes." I tilted my head. What it takes to destroy our father's name, our family, yourself. Ryan scoffed. You think Dad didn't know? You think he didn't benefit from the same shell corporations? I didn't create the system. Claire, I inherited it. That stopped me. For a moment, I felt the world shift ever so slightly beneath my feet. What do you mean? He benefited. Ryan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You think his consulting firm was legit? You think Mom's lake house came from clean hands? I kept things running. Claire, Dad started it. I just scaled it. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had crept in an inch while I wasn't looking. You're lying. He smirked. You were always the smart one, right? Prove me wrong? It was the same dare he gave me when we were kids, and he'd hide my science projects or lie to our parents to get me in trouble. He wanted me to go digging again, but this time, I didn't flinch. I walked over to my bookshelf, pulled out the old filing box I'd been too scared to revisit. Inside were dusty binders, saved flash drives, backup CDs from Dad's office computer. I'd copied them all during a long weekend home 3 years ago while they were at a charity retreat. I hadn't known what I was looking for then, just that something felt off. Now I knew. I started scanning through folders, bank statements, old client reports, internal audits. It didn't take long. One file, labeled golf expenses, seemed harmless at first, until I realized it wasn't just greens fees or equipment. It was a ledger, hidden in plain sight, and Dad's name was on every page. Approvals, transfers, transactions with the same phantom vendors Ryan had used. I turned the laptop around. Ryan stared at the screen with that smug, hollow expression I'd come to associate with his guilt. Told you, he said. Suddenly, I understood the deeper betrayal. My father hadn't just ignored the red flags because of blind loyalty or ego. He had been complicit. He'd raised one child to be a replica of himself and silenced the other so thoroughly that she nearly disappeared. I wasn't just the invisible one. I was the insurance policy, the one whose silence bought their stability. Ryan stood up. You're not going to take him down. Claire, he's old. He's done. Let him fade. Come after me all you want, but leave him out of this. But it was too late. Once you see the rot, you can't pretend the house still stands. I stayed silent, letting him walk out without another word. He slammed the door, hard enough to rattle the picture frames. It didn't matter. I knew what had to be done. I called Montreux that night. There's more, I said. She came to my apartment within the hour, this time with a second agent from financial crimes. We went over the files in detail. Every transaction, every name, every link. When I said Dad's name, neither of them blinked. We've suspected for years, Montreux admitted. But this is what connects everything. I wanted to scream, or cry, or maybe just dissolve, but I didn't. I sat there, ice cold and clear-eyed, while they took digital copies of everything. Will you be able to testify to this chain of custody? The agent asked. Yes, I answered. My voice didn't shake. In the following days, the investigation escalated. Subpoenas, frozen accounts, press leaks. The news caught fire. Former CEO under investigation for decades-long fraud. Headlines danced across screens with phrases like family dynasty collapse and whistleblower daughter exposes multi-million-dollar scam. My name wasn't in the first wave, but it didn't take long before people started connecting the dots. That weekend, My mom showed up again. Her face looked older than it had a week ago. Eyes darker, heavier. "Your father's been served," she said, sitting down without asking. I nodded. "I know. He doesn't blame you." I stared at her. "Does he blame himself?" She didn't answer, just looked down at her hands. "You know," I said quietly, "I spent years thinking I didn't matter. That being overlooked was my fault. That if I were just louder, sharper, more useful, maybe he'd see me. Maybe Ryan would stop treating me like a placeholder." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't done. I kept that part of myself buried so deep. Even I forgot it was there. But it never really goes away. You just live around it. Until one day, it cracks the surface. She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you better." I believed her, but forgiveness didn't feel like a gift to be handed out in one moment. It was a long road paved with truth. Ryan left town. I didn't ask where. His lawyer tried to discredit me in emotion, but it backfired spectacularly when the judge saw the paper trail. Dad hired a crisis firm, tried to settle behind closed doors, but the state wasn't having it. The case moved forward. And me, I stayed quiet. I didn't go on television, didn't give interviews, but the whispers found me anyway. Some people called me brave. Some said I'd betrayed my own blood, as if blood was more sacred than justice, more sacred than dignity. One night, I got an email from a girl I didn't know. "I interned at your brother's firm." It read, "I saw things. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. Thank you for speaking up. You weren't invisible, not to all of us." I cried then. Not because it hurt, but because for the first time, someone had seen me on purpose. But I still hadn't faced my father. And I knew that meeting couldn't be avoided forever. The storm had passed. The wreckage lay bare. But one piece still needed to fall into place, one final confrontation that would determine whether my healing would begin with fury or something more difficult. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale air. It wasn't the kind of place you walk into without feeling something tighten in your chest. I'd been here before, as an observer, a quiet shadow sitting on benches meant for spectators. But today, I wasn't here to watch. I was summoned. They didn't need me to testify. My evidence had already done more damage than any words I could offer aloud. But they did allow a victim impact statement. Not for sentencing, this wasn't a criminal trial yet, but for the board reviewing regulatory sanctions. It was symbolic, and it was enough. I walked into the chamber wearing the simplest black dress I owned. No flair, no color, no mask. He was already seated, my father. Still upright, still dignified in that same navy suit he wore to every quarterly meeting. Every speech where he told investors about values and vision, like they weren't just words to hide behind. His hair was thinner, his face paler, but the power hadn't fully left his posture. That came later. He looked up when I entered. For a second, something flickered across his face, recognition. Maybe regret, but not shame. I didn't expect it. I took the stand. "I'm not here to hurt you," I began, eyes fixed on the table in front of me. "You already did that all on your own." There was no need to raise my voice. The truth didn't need volume to echo. I spent most of my life wondering what I'd done wrong, why I always felt like a footnote in my own family, why my brother's mistakes got covered, while my silence got rewarded with absence. I looked up then, straight at him. But I know now, I was invisible because it was convenient, because seeing me, really seeing me, meant facing what you'd let happen, what you'd built. You didn't protect me. You protected your system. No sound came from his side of the room, just the subtle shift of fabric as he adjusted his seat. "I didn't come here today to punish you," I said. "I came here because I'm done carrying your silence. I won't let your version of the story be the last one told." I stepped down, Not a single eye in that room was dry, not even his. Later that week, the board ruled to revoke his licenses, dissolve what remained of his corporate influence, and permanently blacklist him from holding financial directorships in any registered entity. His legacy, once etched in marble plaques and charity galas, was now footnoted with scandal. And still, no charges. Not yet. I didn't celebrate. I just went home. It was months before I saw him again. This time, he was thinner, seated in the corner booth of a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place where powerful men go to disappear into decaf and newspapers. He looked up when I slid into the booth across from him. No words, just silence. For once. A silence that didn't feel like erasure. "I got your message," he said eventually. "I didn't think you'd come." I almost didn't. He sipped his coffee slowly. "You were always smarter than Ryan." "That wasn't the point," I said. None of this was about proving who was smarter. It was about doing the right thing. A bitter smile crossed his lips. I thought I was protecting something, but I was just protecting rot. He looked old, for the first time, fragile, but I didn't pity him. "You raised us to be loyal to the family," I said, "but never taught us what that loyalty meant." He nodded, almost grateful. "I never thought it'd be you who ended it all." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The ending had already written itself in every contract forged, every silence bought, every daughter dismissed. When I stood up to leave, he asked, "Will you forgive me?" I paused. Maybe one day, but not for you, for me. Outside, the city moved on like it always had, horns blaring, footsteps clashing on sidewalks, lives folding over one another in relentless motion. But I was still. Not stuck, just grounded. I went home and opened the email draft I'd saved for months. A publisher had contacted me after the leak, offering to help shape my experience into a memoir. At first, I'd laughed it off. Who would want to read about the forgotten daughter of a fallen CEO? But now, I knew better. The story wasn't just mine. It was every daughter overlooked. Every whistle left unblown. Every moment someone whispered, "That's just how things are." I hit send. Months passed. I didn't hear from Ryan, and I was fine with that. I heard he was living abroad, trying to reinvent himself. He wouldn't last. People like him need shadows to stand in. And he'd burned them all. Mom sold the lake house. She started teaching art again, something I hadn't seen her do since I was a kid. We talk now, not often, but real, honest. And me. I still walk into rooms and expect to disappear. Trauma doesn't dissolve, it adapts. But now, when I speak, I know I'm heard. When I stand, I don't shrink. Some nights, I replay everything in my head, the meetings, the files, the cold fluorescent lights of interrogation rooms, the moment I saw my own father's name in the ledger, the tremble in my hand as I turned in the final file. And then I breathe. Because justice isn't a moment, it's a reckoning. It's the decision to break a chain even when it wraps around your own wrist. It's knowing you might lose everything and choosing to speak anyway. I wasn't the quiet daughter anymore. I was the storm. And storms, when they pass, leave things cleaner than they found them. Story 2. I'm 33 now, living a quiet life in Seattle. But this morning shattered all of that. My phone lit up, 37 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. The last voicemail was a woman's voice. Unsure. Asking Rachel Donovan, "We think we found your parents." I hadn't heard that name in years, not since I stopped using my legal last name Taylor. I was 12 the day my parents left me at Union Station. On purpose. I grew up in a postcard-perfect town called Hollow Ridge, Pennsylvania. White picket fences, weekend bake sales, a Main Street parade every 4th of July. My parents, Mark and Diane Taylor, owned a hardware store and a bakery. Everyone knew them, everyone loved them, everyone but their own daughter. At school, and in public, they were friendly, funny, involved. At home, cold, calculated, dangerous in ways most people couldn't imagine. My older brother, Liam, was the golden child, straight A student, captain of the soccer team, always had Dad's approval. I, on the other hand, was the family scapegoat, sensitive, artistic, too emotional. According to my mom, they called it tough love. I called it what it was, psychological abuse. By the time I was 10, I already knew the rules. Don't ask questions, don't cry in front of Dad, don't expect praise unless you're Liam. One time, when I was 7, they left me outside a grocery store for an hour because I asked for a chocolate bar. Another time, I got a 96 on a math test and was told, maybe you're not that smart after all. But the real break came when I got an A- in science. It was 6th grade. I remember the report card shaking in my hands as Dad scanned it. A-, he said. What's this? Is this a joke? Mom sipped her tea and didn't look at me. Lazy kids end up cleaning gas station bathrooms. Rachel. I didn't cry. Not until they left me. The next morning, they said we were going on a surprise trip to Chicago. Just me, Mom, and Dad. Liam stayed home for soccer. They were all smiles. Mom packed PB&J sandwiches, humming some old tune. Dad ruffled my hair and cracked jokes the whole drive. It felt wrong. About 3 hours later, we pulled up to Union Station. It was loud and busy, travelers rushing everywhere. I'd never seen anything like it. As we walked into the lobby, Dad turned to me. Honey, wait here, he said, pointing to one of the massive marble pillars. We're going to grab food and move the car. Can I come? No, Mom said sharply. You're 12, you can wait 15 minutes. I hesitated. Something felt off, but I obeyed, because that's what scared kids do. They walked off, hand in hand. I stared at the giant clock in the lobby. 12:17 p.m. I remember the time because I stared at it every 5 minutes after that. 15 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. I started to panic. Around 3 p.m., I saw our family car crawl past the front entrance. I ran to the doors, waving frantically. I'll never forget what I saw next. Dad was behind the wheel. Mom rolled down the window and shouted, "Let's see how you find your way home." Then they drove off laughing. At first, I didn't cry. I froze. I stood there, staring into the street, thinking, no, this is a prank. They'll come back. They didn't. Back inside, I paced the same hallway near the ticket booths for hours. People passed me without a glance. I had no phone, just $6.50 in my pocket, and the fear that if I asked the wrong adult for help, I'd end up in a worse place. Eventually, a station worker named Marla noticed me. She had gray braids and glasses that made her look like a kind librarian. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked. I lied. "My parents are coming back." She waited. I broke. I told her everything. She called security. That night, I gave a full statement to Officer Ramirez of the CPD. I didn't cry until I was in the police car. She handed me a hot chocolate and said gently, "You didn't do anything wrong. Rachel, what they did that's not discipline, that's abandonment." They called Child Protective Services. A social worker named Jamie was assigned to me. She explained I'd be placed in emergency care while they looked for my family. And that was the night I realized something most kids never do. Your family isn't always your safety net. Sometimes, they're the reason you fall. In the days that followed, CPS tried to contact my parents. They denied everything, said I ran off, said I exaggerated, claimed I was rebelling. But they never showed up to retrieve me, never signed any forms, never filed a missing child report. They just left, and I never saw them again. People think foster care is a system. That's generous. It's half paperwork, half prayer. And I was just one more file in a stack. A 12-year-old whose parents had vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but a report, a lie, and a sandwich that never got eaten. I spent the first 2 weeks in emergency shelter care, a converted church basement run by overworked social workers who smelled like old coffee and despair. The kids were quiet, guarded. Some had bruises, some had scars. All of us were waiting for something better, or at least less terrible. I remember sleeping on a cot pushed against a cement wall. I kept my shoes on the first 3 nights. I didn't want someone to steal them. Or worse, wake me up. I was assigned a caseworker named Tina, who smelled like vanilla lotion and always had lipstick on her teeth. She meant well, but she had 26 kids on her caseload, and I was just another number. "Don't worry, Rachel," she said during our second meeting, "we're going to find you a real family." I nodded. I'd already stopped believing in those. My first foster home was with the Barrows. They lived in a narrow row house in Joliet. Nice enough people, at least on paper. Church-going, no arrests, clean kitchen. But they didn't want a daughter. They wanted a tax credit. Mrs. Barrow made me sleep in the laundry room. Said the spare bedroom was for storage. I folded towels and scrubbed baseboards. And she called it chores. Mr. Barrow watched me too closely when I walked past him, and never once called me by my name, just girl. I stayed there for 11 weeks. I left after their oldest son cornered me in the garage. I screamed, loud enough that the neighbors came out. That was the end of that. After that, I bounced. 4 homes in 2 years. One had cockroaches, one had bed bugs, one smelled like cat pee and boiled cabbage. The last one, the Hanleys, was different. They were older, didn't have kids of their own. Mrs. Hanley was a retired nurse. Mr. Hanley fixed bicycles in the garage and listened to jazz on Sunday mornings. They didn't ask too many questions. They didn't touch me. They let me be quiet. It was the first place I didn't flinch in my sleep. Mrs. Hanley taught me how to cook spaghetti from scratch. Mr. Hanley showed me how to fix a leaky faucet. On my 15th birthday, they bought me a used laptop. That was the first time I cried in front of them. Just broke down right there in the kitchen. Mr. Hanley didn't say a word, just handed me a dish towel and said, "Kid, you're allowed to want things." But I still kept my distance, even after they offered to adopt me. I said no. Not because I didn't care about them, but because I didn't trust the word family anymore. It had too many teeth, too much shadow. Instead, I aged out quietly. Got my GED at 17, started working at a grocery store by 18, then enrolled in community college the next fall. Took night classes, worked days, didn't complain. Just kept moving forward, one cracked step at a time. I changed my name legally at 19, dropped Taylor, and became Rachel Donovan. Donovan was my grandmother's maiden name, the one person in my bloodline who'd ever made me feel safe. Back when I was little, and she used to sneak me apple slices dipped in cinnamon when my mom wasn't looking. I figured if I was going to be alone, I might as well belong to someone kind, even if she was dead. I kept my past locked away like a sealed box, no Facebook, no reunions, no contact with anyone from Hollow Ridge. When I Googled my parents' names out of curiosity at 21, all I found was a blurry photo of them at some community event, smiling like nothing ever happened. Liam, my brother, disappeared after graduation. No social media, no wedding registries, no traces. It was like my whole family hit delete on me. Until this morning. It was 7:42 a.m. I'd just gotten out of the shower when my phone rang. Unknown number. I usually don't answer those, but something told me to pick up. A woman's voice. Kind, hesitant. "Hi, is this Rachel Donovan? Formerly, Jennifer Taylor." My chest locked up. She introduced herself as Detective Adrienne Green, from a small precinct in Colorado. "We have some questions about a missing persons report filed recently by your brother," she said. "Liam, yes. He listed you as his sister." I sat down hard on the edge of the bathtub. She asked if I'd be willing to speak with Liam, said he claimed our parents were in serious legal trouble and that he wanted to reconnect before things escalated. I told her I'd think about it. Then I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. That call unzipped something in me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt cold. The kind of cold that seeps in under your ribs when you realize a ghost still remembers your name. They didn't come back for me. Not when I was 12. Not at 15. Not at 18. But now that something had gone wrong, they were suddenly reaching out. Because they needed something. Of course. I sat with that for the rest of the day. Then, at 6:14 p.m., my phone buzzed again. An email. No subject, just an attached PDF file. It was a scanned letter, written in Liam's handwriting. "Jen, if you're reading this, it means Detective Green reached you. I know we don't deserve anything. I know what happened. But I need you to understand something I didn't know they were going to leave you. I thought you went to the bathroom and missed the train. I didn't find out the truth until I was 18. And by then, I was too ashamed to reach out. I'm sorry. Mom and Dad, they're not who you remember. Things have unraveled. There are people asking questions. Legal ones. I don't blame you if you never want to hear from us again. But if you do, please meet me in Denver. I'll wait every day at the train station, just like you did." I read that letter 3 times. Then I closed my laptop. And for the first time in over a decade, I said my old name out loud. Jennifer. It sounded like something I'd buried in a field and accidentally dug up. I didn't pack much, just a carry-on, my laptop, and the courage I wasn't sure I had. Seattle to Denver is about 2.5 hours by plane, but that flight felt like falling into a black hole, the kind you think you escaped, only to realize it was circling you all along. I stared out the window the whole ride, watching clouds drift under us like ghosts. I didn't tell anyone I was going, not my coworkers, not my friends, not even the Hanleys. Part of me still thought it might be a trap that I'd walk off the plane and see my parents' faces, waiting to collect another debt. But I had to know. I had to see Liam. Union Station in Denver is beautiful, grand, old bones, sunlight pouring through arched windows. The kind of place that pretends it never saw abandonment, never heard a little girl scream at the doors of a car pulling away. I walked in just after 10 a.m. It was quieter than I expected. I took a seat near a tall planter and scanned the room. That's when I saw him. He was older. Of course, 35 now. But the shape of his face, the slope of his shoulders, it was him. My brother. The last real person who ever knew the version of me before everything split in half. Liam stood as I approached. I half expected some cheesy reunion moment. Tears, a hug, apologies flooding out in the rush.
But we just stood there.
"Jen," he asked, his voice small. "It's Rachel now," I replied. He nodded. "Right." Still, he didn't move to hug me. I didn't step forward either. We just sat down across from each other like 2 strangers sharing a waiting bench. "How did you find me?" I asked. "I never stopped trying." He said, "I hired a PI last year. It took a while, new name. No social media, but we traced the name change back to your first apartment in Des Plaines." That made me uneasy. I didn't like being found, but I stayed quiet. "You look strong," he said. "You look like Dad," I replied, and it was true. Liam looked down at his hands. "I was hoping you'd say you look like Mom." I didn't. We talked for a while, slowly, cautiously, like animals on opposite ends of a frozen lake. He told me about college, how he'd gone into finance, then quit after a panic attack nearly made him crash his car on I-70. He'd been working as a bartender in Boulder the last few years. Lived alone. No kids. No wife. I asked him about our parents. He stiffened. Still in Hollow Ridge, sort of. What does that mean? He leaned forward. They're under investigation. Fraud. Falsifying financial documents. There's talk of human services looking into past disciplinary actions. Someone submitted a complaint. Was it you? He hesitated. No. But I added testimony once it started. I nodded slowly. So you're the prodigal son now. He winced. You said you didn't know. I continued. Back then, that they left me on purpose. I didn't, he said. That day, I thought you were coming later. Dad told me you'd gotten sick. I believed them, for years. Then I found an old notebook Mom's. She wrote about resetting the family, about letting go of emotional instability. Emotional instability, I repeated. Yeah, he said softly. That's what they called you. I let that hang there. He finally looked me in the eye. Jen Rachel, what they did. I don't forgive it. I want you to know that. Okay. And I know you don't owe me anything. I don't, I said, not cruelly, just truthfully. But I do owe you. He continued. I should have come looking sooner. I should have asked more questions. Why didn't you? His voice cracked a little. Because I was afraid. If they could do that to you. What did it say about me for staying? I didn't answer. We sat in silence again. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a thin folder. Inside was a stack of photocopied letters. Handwritten. Familiar cursive. My therapist told me I needed to read them, to understand how broken they were. I picked one up. It was dated 3 weeks after they left me. Jennifer's behavior remains erratic. We can't raise a child who manipulates reality so thoroughly. We're doing what's best for her, even if she doesn't understand it now. I blinked. They convinced themselves, I said, or they convinced each other. They were always better at lies than parenting, Liam said. Another letter talked about a clean break. Another one described me as volatile, possibly borderline. I was 12. I still slept with a nightlight. I handed the folder back. Why show me this? Because I need you to see that you didn't make it up, that it was real, that they were wrong, and I was weak. There it was, the closest thing to an apology I was going to get. I took a breath. Then I asked the question that had haunted me since the phone call. Why now? Why contact me at all? He looked away. Dad's dying. Stage 4, pancreatic. 6 months, maybe less. My stomach turned. And you thought I'd want to say goodbye. No, he said. I thought you deserved the chance to tell him whatever you want, or nothing. That choice shouldn't be theirs. I stood. The air between us had cooled again. I already said everything I needed to. Back when I stood alone in that train station, waiting. Rachel, please. I turned back. Do they even feel bad? He didn't answer, which told me everything. I flew back that night. Didn't visit the hospital, didn't write a letter, didn't send a message. I didn't need to. They left me once. I would leave them forever. But something strange happened a few weeks later. I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single item, my old backpack. The one I'd carried the day they abandoned me. Still stained with grape juice. Still zipped shut. Inside was a photo. Me and Liam, age 7 and 9, sitting on a tire swing at our grandmother's house. We were laughing. Our parents weren't in the frame. Just us. Just that one sliver of time before everything fractured. There was a note. For what it's worth, I wish I'd grabbed you too. L. I didn't cry. I just sat there, holding the picture, feeling something I couldn't name. Not forgiveness, not closure, just recognition that I'd survived, that I was no longer the girl they left behind. Epilogue. A year later, I legally adopted a dog from a shelter. Her name's Clover. She's skittish, hates thunder, and sleeps at the foot of my bed like a quiet little guardian. Sometimes when she gets scared, she hides under the table. I don't drag her out. I sit with her. I wait, because I know what it means to need safety on your own terms. That's the thing about trauma. You don't erase it. You build a life around it. You fill the cracks with laughter, small rituals, soft mornings. And one day you realize you're not haunted. You're healing. Even if it started the day you were left behind. Story 3. The first time I saw her. She was in chains. I was leaning against a hitch post just outside the saddler's shop in Ashridge, watching the sheriff's wagon roll through town under a sky too damn bright for the kind of cruelty it carried. The wheels creaked over cracked stone and dried mud, but the sound didn't feel like any ordinary wagon. It was heavier, like the weight of what they were hauling had nothing to do with mass, and everything to do with shame. A young woman sat near the back of that wagon, slumped, cuffed, bruised. She had a bonnet hanging off her head like an afterthought, veil torn and stained from the road. Her wrists were red where the iron rubbed skin raw, but her eyes, even behind all that dirt and exhaustion, weren't broken, just watching, sharp. I remember thinking she didn't look like a prisoner, more like a witness to her own trial. They said she was 24. Her name was Ellie, short for Eleonora, and apparently, she had committed the high crime of saying no. See, the sheriff of Ashridge, a man named Alton Priggs, had ordered himself a bride from Missouri, sent letters full of lies, said he was a landowner. Kind, respected, the usual. He didn't mention that he was a bloated bully who thought kindness was weakness and control was owed. When Ellie stepped off the coach and took one good look at him, she didn't smile, didn't speak, and sure as hell didn't say, "I do." In most towns, that'd be awkward. In Ashridge, it was a challenge, and Alton wasn't the kind of man to lose face, and not in front of the saloon, not in front of the church, and definitely not in front of women who might think they could do the same. So now here she was, paraded through the center of town in shackles, treated like a thief instead of a girl who didn't want to be property. I watched as Alton yanked her out of the wagon like she weighed nothing, spun her to face the town, and said something about disobedience and wickedness, claimed she was ungrateful, crazy even, told everyone he could have sent her to the mines, but was showing mercy by putting her to work at the jail until she learned respect. His voice carried like he was proud of it. Nobody moved. Nobody stopped him. Not the preacher, not the store clerks, not the men sipping whiskey in the shade. It wasn't just fear that kept them quiet. It was comfort. People like Alton made the rules around here, and most folks were too used to that to care. She didn't speak, either. Not when someone threw an eggshell at her, not when a little boy laughed and mocked her limp. She just stood there, breathing. I'd seen that kind of silence before. It wasn't weakness. It was survival. I didn't say anything that day, just watched her being hauled into the old jailhouse, door slamming shut behind her. That night, the tavern buzzed with stories. Alton got drunk and loud, said she'd be sweeping floors by dawn, mopping his boots with her pride by the weekend. The regulars laughed. A few didn't. I left before the second round. Couldn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about how she didn't flinch. The next day, she was out on the porch of the jailhouse, hands still cuffed, scrubbing steps. Alton stood nearby, arms folded, basking in his power. She worked in silence, slow and careful, like someone trying to disappear. I came into town to trade eggs. Just routine, but I saw her again behind the fence this time, picking wild blackberries. She plucked them quietly, like she wasn't sure she deserved them. I didn't plan it, but I crossed the road, walked right up, slow so I didn't startle her, took a cloth from my vest inside, a few berries I'd picked earlier, set them down on the post without saying a word, then turned and left. She didn't thank me, didn't need to. That night, I sat on my porch with a meal I didn't taste. My place is a few miles out, quiet, fenced, tucked into a bend where the sky looks bigger than it should. It's been just me since Eliza passed, and even before that. I wasn't much for company, but something about this girl, it wouldn't let go. 3 days later, she had a bruise across her mouth. Someone said they heard her humming while working, and Alton smacked her quiet. No one did anything about it. Again. I rode into town again, not to trade, not to talk, just to see. But she wasn't there. Porch was clean, no sign of her. That night, I stared at the blackberry thicket behind my barn and remembered the way her fingers touched the cloth I'd left soft. Careful, like she'd never been given something without a price. Next morning, I saddled up and rode in. They were building a stage outside the church, a platform. Alton stood there, hammering a sign. She was nearby, back in chains, hood over her head again. This time the rope was tighter. Dressed different. Everything about it said this wasn't punishment anymore. This was a show. I didn't stop, not yet, but I looked at her, really looked, and I said one word under my breath. Enough. It rained that night, soft and steady. Not storm, but something close. The next day, I came into town again, dropped another cloth-wrapped bundle on the windowsill of the jailhouse. She found it after sundown. Just a few berries. Again, simple. But the way she held them spaced them out. Made them last, you'd think it was gold. The next morning, she left something on the stoop. A feather. Tied with lavender. Useless. Precious. That was the beginning. 2 mornings after she left that feather on the stoop, I saw her again, behind the jailhouse, crouched low, hands deep in a wash basin. Her sleeves were rolled up to the elbow, wrists red and chapped. Her hair was pinned back like someone else had done it tight. Uneven. She worked in silence, not just because Alton demanded it, but because silence had become armor. I didn't say anything at first, just stepped off my horse, walked around the edge of the fence, and left a small satchel on the ground near her. "Storm's coming," I said. "Road's gonna wash out if it hits hard." She didn't look up, but she paused just long enough to tell me she heard. "There's a barn on my land," I added. "Dry, no one's using it." Still nothing. I nodded at the satchel. "Biscuits, gloves. You can take them or leave them." Then I turned and walked away. By nightfall, the clouds had thickened into a low, mean gray. I lit the lantern by the porch, kept the fire going, but I couldn't settle. Not really. The rain started slow, then harder, the kind that pounds at the roof like it's asking for something. Just after dark, I heard the creak of my front gate. She stood there, soaked, the satchel hugged tight to her chest. Didn't say a word, just looked at me, not with hope, not with fear, just readiness. Like she'd decided if this was going to be another bad place, she'd face it standing up. I stepped aside, pointed toward the barn. "It's warm, straw's clean, no one'll bother you here." She gave a short nod and followed me down the path. I didn't say anything else, didn't ask questions. That night, she slept in the loft. I stayed in the house, lantern off, rain on the roof like fingers drumming an old hymn. It was the first time in weeks she wasn't behind a locked door. In the morning, she was already awake, already moving. I found her outside, crouched by the chicken coop, murmuring to one of the hens. One of the older ones, a bird with a bad foot. She was holding it gently, like it mattered. "Frostbite in the claw," she said without turning. I nodded. "Got salve in the shed." "I'll fetch it," she said, then went straight to work. No asking, no waiting. Just doing. That afternoon, she fixed the coupe door, tied up the broken hinge with twine and an old nail. Didn't say a word about it. I watched from the porch. That night, she left a biscuit near the barn door, still warm. Next morning, I left my coat on the ladder up to the loft. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. Days passed like that. Quiet, simple, shared. She worked the yard like it belonged to her. I didn't stop her. One evening, after she bandaged the hen's leg with a cut strip from her old dress, I asked her name. She paused. Then Lenora. Not Ellie, not what they wrote on the church posting. This one was hers. I could feel it. That night, the rain came again. We stood in the barn doorway together, mugs in hand, listening. She didn't flinch at the thunder, didn't shrink from the silence. Neither did I. The sheriff came the next morning. Didn't knock, didn't call out, just rode up bold as sin with 2 men behind him. One of them was the butcher's boy. The other I didn't recognize. Just another man in a coat who thought a badge gave him the right to own people. Lenora saw them first, froze. I stepped outside before they got any closer. "She's not yours," I said. Price smiled like spoiled meat. "She's mine by contract. Paid good coin." She refused. She don't get to refuse. Mail-order brides don't get to decide they're too good once they get here. She's not property. She's not yours either. I stepped closer. "Then why are you scared of her being free?" He didn't like that. The other men shifted in their saddles, hands near guns, watching me. Inside, I knew Lenora was watching too. "You think this town will protect her?" he asked. "You think you can—" "I don't think," I said. "I act." For a second, I thought he'd draw, but he didn't. Just spat in the dirt and turned his horse. "This ain't over," he muttered. I didn't answer. Just stood there until their dust disappeared. When I turned, Lenora was by the window, hands tight on the sill. "I won't run," she said. "I know." She stayed. Every morning, she was out before me, feeding the hens, watering the patch near the blackberry bush, fixing things that hadn't even asked to be fixed. She learned how to chop wood without nicking her hand, laughed the first time she burned the coffee, and joked it was still better than jailhouse water. Some nights we'd sit on the porch, quiet. I whittled, she stitched. We didn't fill the space with talk. We didn't need to. She started leaving bundles herbs she found, stones smoothed by the creek, a single feather tied with old thread. I left her coffee, gloves, a carving of a bird I hadn't shown anyone since Eliza. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something sacred. Then, one morning, she came in from town holding a newspaper, face pale. "They're building a platform again," she said. "By the church." I didn't need to ask why. We both knew what it meant. "They're trying to make a show of me," she said. Again. I stood. She didn't say stop, didn't say no. But she followed me to the barn and helped saddle my horse. I didn't say we'd fix it. I said we're done letting them decide. And she nodded. That evening, we rode into town together. We rode into Ashridge at dusk. The sky was low, smeared with smoke and cold air. They'd raised the platform right in front of the chapel again. I could see the beams from a quarter-mile out, nailed rough and high like scaffolding meant to strip a person bare. The crowd was already gathering, not as many as the first time, but enough to hum with judgment. Alton Priggs was standing on the platform like he'd won something. He held a rope in one hand and a rolled-up paper in the other. Probably her old contract, the one that gave him a bride. And, in his mind, ownership. She had her chance, he was saying, loud enough for the saloon to hear. Now the town decides. I'm done waiting. Lenora sat straight in the saddle beside me, She wasn't shaking, but I could feel her breath tighten. She hadn't said a word since we left the ranch, but I knew what was in her, and it wasn't fear. It was rage that had learned patience. We stopped just outside the square. I tied the horses and handed her the scarf from my coat pocket. She looked at it, then at me. "You sure?" she asked, voice low. I nodded. "If we don't stop it now," I said, "they'll just find another girl to chain." She held my gaze, then tucked the scarf into her palm and stepped down without a sound. The sheriff saw us coming and laughed. "Well, well," he called out, "the caretaker arrives. Come to return the girl, or claim her with a ring." I ignored him, walked toward the platform, slow and deliberate, until I was just a few feet from the bottom step. "She's not yours," I said, calm, even. "She's not yours either. She's not anyone's." That got quiet. The crowd shifted. A few folks turned their heads. A couple of the older women stiffened. One man, the butcher's apprentice, spat into the dirt, but didn't say anything. "She signed a contract." Prigg said. "I paid. She ran. You can't just undo what's written." "Maybe not," I said, "but you can burn it." Then I pulled a single silver coin from my coat, the same kind used at the general store for grain or cloth, and dropped it at his feet. "For what she was worth to you," I said, which is to say nothing. He turned red fast, looked like he might strike me, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the people watching. Maybe it was the weight of what had changed in their faces. Lenora stepped forward then. No chains, no veil, just her, tall, shoulders back, bruise faded. She said, loud enough to carry, "I'm not your shame, Sheriff, and I'm not your story." Then she stepped off the platform without waiting for permission. I moved to meet her. Together. We walked. No one stopped us. Not even him. The wind picked up as we left the square. I heard someone, maybe the preacher's wife, whisper, "It's not right what they did to her." Another voice murmured, "No, but it's right what she's doing now." By the time we got back to the ranch, the stars were coming out. I made coffee. She changed out of the brown dress they'd stuffed her into for the platform, came out barefoot in one of the shirts I'd left hanging by the barn. We sat on the porch, listening to the quiet. She didn't say thank you. I didn't expect it. What we'd done, it wasn't a favor. It was a decision. A line in the dirt that said, "No more." The town kept its distance after that. Some folks nodded if we passed on the trail. A few never made eye contact again. But the sheriff, he kept to the saloon, mostly, still loud, still bitter, but smaller somehow, diminished. He never came back to the ranch. I don't think he had it in him anymore. Lenora stayed. She started calling the chickens by names, ridiculous ones, like Fancy and Trouble. She replanted the herbs near the barn and fixed the cellar door with scrap wood and wire. One day, she handed me a coat I thought I'd lost. "I patched the lining," she said. I didn't know what to say, so I just wore it the next morning without a word. That was enough. Weeks passed, then months. We didn't rush anything. She had her own room, her own drawer, her own space. I never asked her to fill Eliza's place, because no one could. And she never asked me to forget what came before, because that's not how healing works. You carry it with you. You just stop letting it define the root. Some days, she'd find me at the fence line and just sit beside me, knees drawn up, arms around them. We wouldn't speak, just watch the wind move through the grass. Some nights, she'd hum to herself while cooking. Nothing fancy, just a little sound, but it made the house feel warmer. She was finding her rhythm, and I was finding mine. Then, one morning, she stood in the doorway of the barn, hands on her hips, and said, "I want to build something." "What kind of something?" I asked. "A shed, for drying herbs, for the chickens, for me." I nodded. "I'll help. She smiled. I figured you would. We started that week. By the first frost, the shed stood solid and strong beside the coop. Inside, hooks lined the wall, baskets for roots, shelves for dried sprigs of lavender and yarrow. She hung a strip of cloth across the door, painted with a circle and a line through it. What's that? I asked. She shrugged. A sign for no trespassers, or bad luck, or both. I chuckled. I'll remember to knock. That winter, the ranch was quiet, peaceful. I built a new gate. She learned to make bread that didn't turn to rock. We traded once a week in town. Most people kept their comments to themselves. A few, the seamstress. The preacher's daughter even smiled when they saw her. Progress, I guess. We never married. Not because we didn't want to, but because we didn't need that paper to prove anything. She stayed because she chose to, and I asked for nothing more. One night, near spring, we sat by the fire. The wind was soft, pushing at the windows, but the warmth held. She looked at me and said, "You were the first person who didn't want to own me." I didn't answer right away. Then you were the first person who didn't look at my silence and walk away. We didn't toast. We didn't kiss. We just sat there, side by side, fire crackling, knowing something had ended and something else had begun. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just real. Ashridge never apologized, but it learned to stay out of our way. The sheriff faded. I heard he lost the badge. Someone said he moved east. Someone else said he drinks himself silent now. I don't care. He's behind us. She's not. She's right here barefoot in the garden, sun on her back, humming that old half song like it belongs to no one but her. And every time I hear it, I know. We don't belong to the town. We don't belong to our past. We only belong to what we build with bare hands and broken histories on the soil we choose to stand on. That's where we begin.